In 1853, Japan was a feudal nation. Samurai still carried swords, the economy ran on rice, there were no railways, no telegraphs, no factories, no newspapers. The country had been deliberately sealed from the outside world for over 2 centuries. Most Japanese people had never seen a Westerner. Most had never seen a steamship. Then, on July 8th of that year, 4 American warships sailed into Edo Bay, what is now Tokyo Bay, and everything changed. Within 50 years of that moment, Japan had built a national railway network, established a modern army and navy, created a constitutional government, founded universities, built factories producing steel, textiles, and weapons, won a war against China. Then, in one of the most shocking upsets in military history, won a war against Russia, a European great power, defeated by Japan. 50 years. From feudal isolation to modern industrial nation. From samurai to battleships. From rice economy to steel mills. No country in history had ever modernized this fast. Not Britain, which took over a century. Not Germany, which had decades and the advantage of neighboring industrial nations. Not the United States, which had an entire continent of resources and a century and a half. Japan did it in 50 years. And the way they did it, the specific choices made, the specific values applied, the specific cultural ingredients that made it possible, is one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of human civilization. To understand Japan's modernization, you have to understand what Commodore Perry's arrival in 1853 actually felt like from the Japanese side. For 250 years, under the policy of Sakoku, national isolation, Japan had kept the world out. A single Dutch trading post on a tiny artificial island in Nagasaki Harbor was the only permitted point of contact with the West. Japanese citizens were forbidden from leaving the country, on pain of death. Foreign ships were turned away. Then Perry arrived with 4 warships, 2 of them steam-powered iron vessels that the Japanese had never seen before. They moved without wind. They were enormous. They carried cannons that could destroy a city from the water. When they fired a salute, people in Edo fled in panic. Japan had no military capacity to resist. The shogunate signed the Convention of Kanagawa in 1854, opening 2 ports to American ships. More treaties followed with other Western powers. The humiliation was total. But here is where Japan made a choice that was not inevitable, and that defined everything that followed. Rather than resist modernization, deny its necessity, or collapse into factional conflict, the reformers who came to power in the Meiji Restoration of 1868 made a decision of extraordinary strategic clarity. If we cannot beat the West, we will become the West, and then we will surpass it. The young Emperor Meiji was restored to nominal power. The shogunate was dissolved, and Japan embarked with conscious, deliberate, top-down determination on the most ambitious national transformation in history. The Charter Oath of 1868, the founding document of the Meiji government, contained a line that should be understood as one of the most consequential policy statements in modern history. Civilized knowledge shall be sought throughout the world so as to strengthen the foundations of imperial rule. This was not rhetoric. It was a program, and the Meiji government implemented it with a systematic thoroughness that was itself a demonstration of Japanese organizational capacity. The government sent delegations abroad, most famously the Iwakura mission of 1871 to 1873, in which nearly half the entire Japanese cabinet boarded ships and spent nearly 2 years traveling through the United States and Europe. They visited factories, schools, hospitals, parliaments, law courts, ports, and military installations, They took detailed notes on everything. They brought back not just observations, but people, foreign experts, hired at enormous expense to come to Japan and teach. These foreign experts, called Oyatoi Gaikokujin, hired foreigners, numbered in the thousands over the Meiji period. Engineers, doctors, military officers, lawyers, educators, architects, agronomists. They came from Britain, France, Germany, the United States, and beyond. Each was hired to teach a specific skill, to help build a specific institution, to transfer a specific form of knowledge. And then they were sent home. This was deliberate. The goal was not dependence on foreign expertise. It was the rapid acquisition of foreign knowledge, the training of Japanese people to master it, and then the independence to apply and develop it without further assistance. Germany's legal system became the basis for Japanese law. France's model informed the early Japanese military. Britain's Royal Navy shaped the Japanese Navy. America's land-grant university model influenced Japanese higher education. Japan did not choose one model and imitate it. It studied all of them, selected the best elements of each, and synthesized something new. This capacity to absorb, adapt, and synthesize external knowledge, rather than simply copy it, was not new in Japanese culture. Japan had done exactly the same thing with Chinese civilization 1,000 years earlier, absorbing Buddhism, Confucianism, written language, and political philosophy from China, and transforming them into distinctly Japanese forms. The Meiji modernization was applying a deeply ingrained cultural skill to a new and urgent situation.
Speed of modernization is not just a question of policy and resources. It is a question of whether the society doing the modernizing has the cultural raw material to absorb and deploy new knowledge quickly. Japan did, and several specific cultural factors made the difference. Literacy. By the time Perry arrived, Japan's literacy rate was estimated at around 40 to 50% for men, and somewhat lower for women. Extraordinarily high for a pre-industrial society. The Edo period's urban culture had produced a population that could read, calculate, and follow written instructions. When the Meiji government began establishing modern schools and printing modern textbooks, it was working with a population already prepared to learn from them. The samurai class. Japan's warrior elite, the samurai, were not simply fighters. They were educated administrators, many of whom had spent the long peace of the Edo period as bureaucrats, teachers, and scholars. When the Meiji Restoration abolished the samurai class as a hereditary caste, it released an enormous reservoir of educated, administratively capable men into a modernizing economy that desperately needed them. Many of the engineers, officers, and officials who built Meiji Japan came from former samurai families. Confucian values. Japan's social culture, shaped by centuries of Confucian influence, emphasized education, hierarchical discipline, collective loyalty, and hard work as fundamental virtues. These values aligned almost perfectly with the demands of industrial modernization. Workers who showed up reliably, learned new skills readily, followed instructions within organizational hierarchies, and understood their individual contribution as serving a collective good. National identity. Japan was, by the time of Meiji, a society with a very strong sense of being Japanese, a shared culture, shared language, shared myths of origin, and a history of defending itself as a distinct civilization. This national cohesion meant that the Meiji government's call to modernize for Japan, to strengthen the nation against Western pressure, resonated powerfully. People were willing to work hard, sacrifice comfort, and accept disruption because they understood what was at stake. This was not abstraction, it was survival. The scale of what the Meiji government built in 50 years is almost impossible to fully absorb. Education. In 1872, the government issued the Fundamental Code of Education, establishing a national system of compulsory elementary schools. By 1900, school enrollment was nearly universal. By 1910, Japan had universities producing engineers, doctors, lawyers, and scientists trained to international standards. In less than 4 decades, Japan built an educational system from scratch, capable of producing the technical personnel a modern industrial nation required. Railways. The first Japanese railway opened in 1872, connecting Tokyo and Yokohama. By 1906, the government had nationalized the major lines and was building a national network. By the end of the Meiji period, Japan had thousands of kilometers of track connecting its major cities, the infrastructure backbone of an industrial economy. Industry. The Meiji government built model factories, government-owned enterprises in textiles, steel, shipbuilding, and armaments to demonstrate industrial techniques and train workers. Then it sold many of them to private entrepreneurs at low prices, seeding a private industrial sector that grew rapidly. The great Japanese industrial conglomerates, the zaibatsu, that dominated the economy for decades, began forming in this period. Military. The Meiji government replaced the feudal military system with a conscript army modeled on the Prussian army and a navy modeled on the British Royal Navy. Universal military conscription was introduced in 1873, another radical break with feudal hierarchy. The army and navy were built with such speed and competence that by 1895, Japan had defeated China, and by 1905 had defeated Russia, in wars that announced Japan's arrival as a major power to a stunned world. Law and governance. Japan adopted a constitution in 1889, the Meiji Constitution, creating a parliamentary system while maintaining imperial authority. A modern legal code was established. A civil service examination system was created. The apparatus of a modern state, courts, police, taxation, currency, was built piece by piece, often under the direct guidance of foreign advisors who were simultaneously training their Japanese replacements.
Modernization at this speed is never without cost, and Japan's Meiji transformation was no exception. The abolition of the samurai class destroyed the economic foundation of an entire social group. Former samurai who had served as hereditary retainers for generations suddenly found themselves without income or role. Some adapted, entering the new army, the new bureaucracy, the new business world. Others did not, and samurai rebellions in the 1870s were the violent expression of that displacement, the most serious being the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877, immortalized in Western consciousness by the film The Last Samurai. Traditional crafts, architectural practices, and ways of life were disrupted or displaced by industrialization. The pace of change was simply too fast for many communities and traditions to adapt. Things that had existed for centuries vanished in a generation. And the nationalism that fueled Japan's modernization, the sense of collective purpose, the determination to be strong, had a shadow side that the 20th century would make catastrophically visible. The same forces that built Meiji Japan's railways and universities also built the imperial ambitions that led Japan toward militarism, colonialism, and ultimately the catastrophic wars of the 1930s and 1940s. But alongside all of this, something remarkable survived. Japan modernized without erasing itself. The language remained Japanese. The aesthetic sensibility, the love of restraint, of natural materials, of seasonal beauty, of the small and the carefully made, persisted alongside the factories and the battleships. Buddhism and Shinto continued to shape daily life. The tea ceremony, the art of the garden, the practice of calligraphy, these did not disappear in the rush toward modernity. They were maintained, sometimes deliberately, sometimes simply because they were too deeply embedded to dislodge. The Japan that emerged from the Meiji period was genuinely modern and genuinely Japanese. It had not become a copy of Britain or Germany or America. It had absorbed what it needed from those places and remained unmistakably itself. That ability to modernize without losing identity, to adapt without assimilating, To take from the world without being taken over by it may be the most remarkable achievement of the entire Meiji transformation, and it is visible still in the Japan that exists today.
How did Japan modernize so quickly? Because it made a clear-eyed decision about its situation and had the cultural capacity to act on that decision with extraordinary speed and discipline. It started with a moment of profound humiliation. 4 American warships that Japan could not resist, and turned that humiliation not into bitterness or denial, but into fuel, into a national determination to learn everything that needed to be learned, build everything that needed to be built, and do it faster than anyone thought possible. It was able to do that because of what it already was: a literate, disciplined, organizationally capable society with a strong sense of shared identity and a 1,000-year-old habit of absorbing external knowledge and making it Japanese. The Meiji modernization was not a miracle. It was the application of existing cultural strengths to a new and urgent problem. Japan did not become something it was not. It became more fully what it already was, and directed those qualities at one of the most ambitious national projects in human history. The trains we marveled at in a previous episode, the cleanliness we've examined, the precision and the pride and the collective discipline that shows up in everything from a 7-minute Shinkansen turnaround to a perfectly maintained queue on a station platform, all of it has roots here. In the decision made in 1868 by a generation of Japanese leaders who looked at the modern world, understood what it required, and said, "We can do this. We will do this. And we will do it on our own terms." They were right.